reviewer needs to look at. What is the role of trust in a peer review? What are the do's and don'ts of a peer review? Detection of misconduct, how do you do it if you have to, or penalties for authors who indulge in misconduct, and to conclude, my conclusion. So what is a peer review? So as we discussed yesterday also, just going through it, a peer review has been defined as a process of subjecting an author's scholarly work, research, or ideas to the scrutiny of others who are experts in the same field. So basically, this is the author. He has a manuscript which he needs to get published. He's written it. He then submits it to an editor, who then allots it to this group of review.
Ashi, your slide is stuck, I guess. Are you able to hear me? Ashi, are you there?
I think we have lost him.
He must be rejoining, I guess.
He's back, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, Ashi, we can see the slides.
Actually, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. So if we go onto social media and we see what is the update about a peer review, and basically a peer review is nothing but the desire to review the paper rather than feeling obliged to do so, and it requires a lot of patience, as was mentioned by the speakers yesterday. So some reviewers don't want to put in the effort to make suggestions if it is not immediately publishable. So there's about you need to have a lot of time, you need to have a lot of dedication, you need to have a lot of willingness to do the job, and how to do it properly with the right ethical manner is of prime importance. So basically, this is the peer review process, which again is summarized that the scientist performs experiments, writes them up as an article, sends them to the editor for publication. The editor then hands it over to a set of reviewers who then sit down and analyze the manuscript. And then this procedure goes back to the editor, or then the editor sends it back to the author. And this process continues for some time, and then it is decided whether the manuscript is accepted or rejected for that particular journal. So the best that reviewers can call themselves is they can call themselves as teachers and mentors rather than critics. And it is important that all manuscripts should be treated like your own. So if you would like someone to treat your manuscript with respect, so you treat the other's manuscript also with equal respect. So you give equal diligence and you give equal importance to every manuscript that comes to you as a reviewer. So that is the only way you can do good possible justice to all the manuscripts that you get. So coming to what do researchers want as authors and as readers. So here we can see that this was something which was shared, but I'll just concentrate on the second point, that authors need a certification or a quality stamp. You need something which validates what you have done, whether it's quality work. And the reason for publishing is that you need to reach out to the readers. So the readers need to know that, yes, this information which has come to me or which has been published in this particular journal is of a valid certification. It has the quality, and it is a very good publication. It's a very good journal, and it's a very good article in that particular journal. So that is what we all want. We want quality. And what do researchers want as authors and readers? Well, authors want to be treated fairly, and readers want trustworthy articles which they can depend on. So going on to these things, a fair treatment of authors is basically what ethics and peer review is all about. So in a peer review, you can have various kind of a reaction, a blunt no, a brilliant, or an awesome, or a yes, or a maybe for a publication. But in the end, what is important is that all the reviewers, even though they're working independently, have to treat all the manuscripts or all the authors that they get should be done in an equal way. So the points which the reviewer needs to look at, just to brush through, this was discussed yesterday at length, the originality of work, how original the work is, what is the importance, how relevant it is to the current scenario or to the field of study. Is there any clarity of thought? Is the manuscript sending a point across? What are the strengths and weaknesses? Is the introduction well written? Is the methodology okay? Data analysis, has it been done properly? Are the results well compiled? Is there a good discussion and a conclusion? So all these things, the internal consistency of the manuscript, the writing style, the figure table presentation, whether the title is appropriate, the abstract is appropriate, the conclusion is appropriate. So all that summary, you as a reviewer will come to know whether this is a valid a publication or not. And the most important thing, as in all things in life, trust. So peer review is based on trust. And the peer review process, in essence, determines what becomes a public record of science, is based on trust. So trust between the authors and the editors, because the author is somebody who submits his manuscript to the editor. And then the editor trusts the reviewers to do the reviewing on behalf of the editor. So it is basically a trust between the author and the editor and the reviewer. So the manuscript should be considered as a confidential document. The intellectual content of that is the property of the authors. It should not be in any case disclosed to the others. And this can be used by other people in their research. So it should be respected, and do not share any kind of print copies of the manuscript with anyone. Keep it confidential until review process is completed, and destroy it immediately after the review process is over. So sometimes what happens is, if I have a junior colleague or someone who I need to help, require the help during the review process, like if I have a manuscript and I need a colleague's help, so you can mention that name and affiliation to the editor, and you can involve that particular person, but that person has to be confidential about it, should not talk to others about the document, and should not share it with others. So that is something called a free floating document. So that is something which means that the document is open for all. That should not happen. Also, it's important to maintain the spirit of the peer review. So you should not share the data. You should not use the idea. Basically, you should respect that is the author's intellectual property right. You should provide an honest and critical assessment, provide specific suggestions for improvement, avoid any conflict of interest, and help the editor to reach a decision on a paper. So basically, the final decision always rests with the editor. The reviewer recommends, but it is finally the editor who will decide whether it gets published or not. And then the reviewer report for the authors should be in line with what was written for the director. This we had explained and discussed in length yesterday. So also, you need to accept to review only those articles which are in your area of expertise. So for example, if you feel that it's not in your area of expertise, you're very fair enough that you can reject those articles, and you'll have to complete the review in time. So as we discussed yesterday, as a short reminder, you need to finish it as soon as possible, so that it helps hasten the review process, and do not wait till the end moment for you to finish the review. Should you communicate directly with the authors? That's a strict no. Only through the editor. Do not break the chain, and reviewers always remain anonymous. So that is done because if there's a junior reviewer who's probably reviewing a paper which is written by a very senior person, and if they somehow know each other, then if they're not anonymous, then the junior reviewer will get intimidated by the senior's presence, that, oh my God, such a senior person has written this paper, and he will be bound to accept it. But so that's why reviewers remain anonymous. They do not know, the author will not know who has reviewed the paper. So our reviewers are supposed to detect plagiarism. So, you are not asked to detect plagiarism. You're not asked to detect fraud. You're not asked to detect any misconduct or any ethics-based issues. And ethics is the whole and sole responsibility of the author. Your responsibility is to recognize that this is a confidential academic document, and you have to maintain the privacy of that document. So broadly, misconduct can be two: publication misconduct and scientific misconduct. So publication misconduct is like when you're trying to analyze data, that whole data becomes a monster for you to handle. And then you've probably fabricated it in such a way that it becomes difficult for you to show that this is genuine data. So this was a recent article which came out in the paper about May 19, that there was an eminent German minister who had to quit because of plagiarism in a thesis which she was ongoing just before she joined the government. So it's taken as a very serious charge in most countries, and they are ramifications and their implications of it. In fact, she had to quit the government because of this plagiarism charge. Publication misconduct can be plagiarism, duplicate publication. So duplicate publication means you publish it in 2 separate journals at the same time or at different times. There are several counters in which you can prevent this from happening. So you can prevent. So you can prevent duplicate publication. You can prevent duplication publication by not sending it to 2 separate journals at the same time. Duplicate submission is sending the same thing to the same journal at the same time. That should all, or at different time intervals, but the same manuscript is sent to the same journal. So we have automated checks to prevent that from happening. Appropriate acknowledgement of prior research and researchers. Appropriate identification of all the co-authors is important. If someone has contributed to the paper and you're not mentioning that name, that is also a misconduct. And conflict of interest. So what is conflict of interest? It is a person has a conflict of interest when he or she has an attribute that is invisible to the reader and or the editor, but that may affect his judgment. So for example, if I'm doing a study on, I'm doing a research on TMJ, and I get a paper which is working on, which is showing the same kind of research on a TMJ aspect which I'm studying. So I can say that I do not want to do to review this particular topic because there's a conflict of interest, because the findings of the study which I'm reviewing may influence my work, or my work will influence that study. I would not want that study to be published. So these are the small ethical issues that come across while you're reviewing a paper. Coming on to scientific misconduct. So scientific misconduct includes fabrication, in which you basically make up research data, and falsification, that is manipulation of data. So fabrication is making up data or results and recording them or reporting them. So basically you're lying about things. So fabrication in a layman's term would be lying, and falsification is manipulation of existing data. So that means you're cheating. So you're manipulating research materials, manipulating equipment or processes, or changing or omitting data or results that the research is not accurately present in the research record. Or you can use improper use of humans or animals in research. So basically, what is the ideal bar? So we need to, we need to have a balance between and to stick to the research integrity and try and maintain data secrecy at the same time, and not go towards the scientific misconduct, that is fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. So we should not, as plagiarism means, it means stealing somebody's idea. It is the appropriation of another person's idea, process, or results, or words without giving appropriate credits. So what do reviewers need to maintain? As I mentioned before, you need to be honest about things. You need to have a very high professional integrity. And what are the penalties for authors who indulge in misconduct? So there is something called a corrigendum, which is published by the author or by the paper or the journal. So here are some examples. Like this is an article in which the authors regret that when the above paper was published, equation 2 was incorrect. It has now been reproduced correctly below. The authors would like to apologize for any inconvenience caused. So the equation was changed so that the research data would be appropriate to the needs. This could be an oversight. It could have been intentional. We don't know, but a corrigendum has been published. Another example is that the authors regret that they had missed to include the name of the author, Dr. Mahmood M. Iliki, of some particular chest paper in the original published. So they totally skipped out a co-author who's probably involved in the study. So that is also plagiarism, or it's also it's misconduct. Then there is the authors apologize for any inconvenience caused, because page 135 of this paper states that in the last 14 days of follow-ups after baseline, participants assigned to the intervention group completed a short description of situation in which they used each of the strategies. Intervention participants did not complete their short description. So there was some data which was manipulated, or which was left out on oversight or whatever. So what are the penalties for authors who indulge? So people say, okay, fine, I'll do this, but what difference does it make? How does it affect me? Obviously, the implications are very severe. It is taken very seriously. In fact, plagiarism is being considered a very serious offense, and it is almost like a civil offense nowadays. And a journal can publish a note of concern, or it can put you under investigation if they find that you have engaged in plagiarism. So Another way is that they can retract the article completely from literature. So there is a timeline, or they can put a retraction note and name and shame the author. So that is even more disgracing for somebody in academics, that your name, your article would be there on the internet. It will be easily downloadable, but there'll be a big retracted on the thing, and these records will remain forever. I mean, on the internet. It's not that there's a print or it's something going to be there online forever. So these articles are retracted, and if it is basically a shame or a name shaming for the authors who indulge in this kind of misconduct. Also, it is important that those who are in academics can contact the universities to review their ethics policies now and then. It's important for them to keep up to date about the basic review the guidelines, or what are they expected to follow, what are the basic criteria or the quality that they should follow. And way back in December 2019, in our country, the University Grants Commission made classes mandatory on ethics misconduct of publication for PhD students. So this was a welcome change at that point of time. And then the recent update from them is that in October 2020, they then published a guidance to promote good research practices and to curb plagiarism. So they've come out with a guidance document which was published in September 2020 on good academic research practices. So this is a PDF document. If you want, I can share it with you. I can share any part of this presentation with you at the end of this session, or you can contact me later. And this gives a basic guidance as to how good academic research practices should be followed in India. So this is a step in the right direction, and it was published by InflibNet. So to conclude, basically we need to follow the review of manuscripts for peer-reviewed journals. It raises many ethical issues and problems. The reviewer must be aware when deciding to review a paper through
Ashi, we can't hear you. Kindly redo the share screen process again.
तो दीदी गई? अच्छा, मैं जा रही हूँ वहाँ पे कटिंग करवाने.
Ashi, can you hear us?
Ashi is there.
Yeah, can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see the conclusion screen.
Yeah.
Is that what you want?
Till where could you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we did hear you. This is the slide where
This is the slide which we got stuck. So
okay, so basically, to conclude, the reviewer should strive to provide reviews that must meet high standards of ethics as well as high standards of science. And when in doubt, the reviewer must discuss his or her concerns with the editor or the journal staff. Some forethought and planning will enable the reviewer to avoid some potential platforms. And it's important to respect the journal, the manuscript that you get. You have to follow very high ethics. You should maintain integrity and be honest with yourself as well as with the entire review process. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. These are some links for the further reading. I saw it in the chat box that you wanted the link to the Elsevier Research Academy. So that is what you can follow. In case you have any more doubts, you're free to contact me at any point of time. I think that we can wrap up our session here. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much, Ashi, for a swift and a neat presentation. Couple of queries here. Would you like to answer that?
Yes, please.
One is from the chat box. If one comes to know of a senior colleague who has published same paper in 2 journals, what to do? That seems to be quite unethical. What do you do? You are a genius. See, you are a junior in a department and a senior does that. Right. I'm withholding the name of the person who has put up the question.
Okay, so coming back to the question, it's can you the same paper is published in 2 places.
Yeah, and you come to know about it.
Okay, so that can be reported to the editor of that particular journal, and that can be brought to the notice that the same data has been published twice. So that is basically duplication of data, which is
Yeah, one can write to the editor straight away.
Yeah.
There's no.
So that is the way, and then the editor takes a call as to what to do about it, whether to retract. First, the authors are contacted, and they are given a justification. Then they are asked for a justification, and then the editor decides whether to retract the article or to name or shame them, or whatever the journal policy is. Ma'am Divya, ma'am?
Fine.
Yeah, means we can be or we should. So I think we should. It's our duty that we should report it to the editor that anyhow it has been missed. Actually, initially we do see many big authors have submitted the same type of paper in 2 or 3 different journals, but they are not exactly the same. The title is changed. Some manuscript is also a bit changed, so it's not 100% the same. But yes, we do see people publishing similar article in multiple journals.
We should
was-
report it. We should report
it
it.
was possible earlier because the plagiarism softwares, I think they were not so strong then. But today, if anybody is doing it, it comes to notice immediately. And if someone finds, it's the duty of the person to report to the journal
Yes.
editor.
Okay, Ashi, we have 4 more minutes for a couple of questions. We'll start at 5:30 with Krishna's presentation. So next question is from my colleague Vinay from PGI about publication misconduct. How reviewers comes to know which co-author is left behind to be included or has been excluded? Publication misconduct is on the part of the author or the reviewer?
No, the reviewer would not know about the co-authors to be included in the manuscript. Basically, only the manuscript goes to the co-author, and probably only the first author's name goes alongside sometimes. But even then, it is completely blinded, and the reviewer has no role in this. This role is about when it is published, or when, as I mentioned in one of those articles which I'd shown, that they'd forgotten a co-author. So they then realized, and you get in touch with the editor, and that is the editor's prerogative, basically.
On the same note, there's another query from Dr. Abhilasha, an oral surgeon.
Right.
And she is asking what to do if appropriate identification of co-authors is not done, like someone publishes your work without putting your name.
Yeah, so this is something that we had already discussed. If you feel that you have the intellectual property rights and it is your work, so if Dr. Sachin has done some amazing work and I pick up the idea and I publish it, and he feels that this is my thought process, this is my idea, and he has substantial evidence to prove that that was his.
So picking an idea is one thing. The guy has published the whole paper without putting my name
picking
in.
Up the that's what
this happens in cases of thesis actually in the department. It's a common scenario. Sadly, it is a common scenario, Ashi.
So then
and the postgraduate student is left behind, and the faculty members push it the paper as one of their own.
True.
This happens quite often.
So
Abhilasha would agree.
It is the responsibility of probably the person who's the aggrieved person to get in touch with the editor and share this data, so that the editor takes the needful remedial measures are taken. So that is
okay. I hope that
looks like a grievance cell will open up in the editorial section.
We can have Abhilasha's lecture on that next time.
Troubleshooting is basically the most important part of an editor's job. It's a very challenging job.
Exactly.
But that's what editors.
Most of the legalities lie with the editor-in-chief. It doesn't lie with the reviewer, actually. That way we are saved.
It's a big responsibility, and that's why we need someone very capable at the helm to.
So next question, Ashi. 2 more minutes to go. Mohammed Altaf, any laws in country, ma'am, to deal with plagiarism? IPC, Indian Penal Code laws.
Dr. Altaf is a very dear friend of mine. He's a plastic surgeon as well. Thanks for joining us. So the laws concerned with the plagiarism are 2 right now: Section 57 and Section 63.
Okay.
So basically, they're covered under the Copyright Act. So under Section 63 of the Copyright Act, the punishment can be given. You can be imprisoned for about 3 months to 3 years, with a fine of about 50,000 to 2 lakhs. And if section 57 says that it provides the author the special right to claim authorship of their work, to detain and claim damages or in respect to any modification, distortion of the work, which would be damaging to his or her honor or reputation. So basically, it is the reputation of the author at stake. So that is the honor which he's trying to protect. So the law protects against this. So this is not a crime. It is an unethical act, but it is a civil offense. So a case can be filed against you. And there have been instances where eminent vice chancellors have been actually jailed because of plagiarism charges. So it is a serious offense, and even the UGC takes very strongly against it. So that's why it's very important that you should be ethical in whatever you do. Thank you.
Okay, so it's already 5:30, Ashi, so we can stop sharing your screen. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Stay with us in the next presentation, and then we can have a couple of queries at the end of the second session, which may involve you, right?
Thank you so much.
So, Krishna, are you there? Yeah, we can hear you, but the voice is not clear, Krishna. Do you have a earphone? We can't hear you, Krishna. The volume is quite.
I think, Sachin, if you want to take one more question, quick question, till the time Krishna is setting up.
Okay. Okay, Shikha Jaiswal has come up with a thought. Student thesis should be published by their first name, should be included into the policy of the college or university, governed by Board of Studies or Academic Council of the college. Shikha, that is the norm mostly. The way we do in PGI is the first author is always the student who has conducted the study. The chief guide can be the corresponding author. By law of the institute, the postgraduate student would be the first author of his or her thesis.
That's absolutely correct. Even we are in line with the same thing. What we follow is that the PG student who writes the paper or who conducts the study is the first author. And if I'm the guide, I'm the last author. So
you can be the corresponding author also.
Yeah. So that is what we follow here. Basically, there is no doubt that the student should be the first author in his own thesis publication.
So Krishna,
hi, sir. Yeah, I'm back. But the problem is with the screen share, so I just sent you. I mean, could you please?
Ma'am, can you share the
email?
presentation, or I can do that?
I've emailed it to both of you, ma'am.
No, I can do that. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll do
Thanks.
that, ma'am. We'll do that. Just a second.
Thanks.
Meanwhile, we can take another question. Nipin Kalal asks, many journal ask the name of the reviewer for peer review process while submitting the manuscript. Is it misconduct? Dr. Nipin, we had discussed this yesterday at length. Individual journals have individual journal policies, and basically asking of the name of the reviewer is something which is done sometimes to increase the reviewer database. But if the journalist is technically asking for the date for the submitting the during submitting the manuscript, it is possibly should not be done. We cannot say it is misconduct. It is basically a journal policy. I think Krishna is on, and
Krishna, I have shared the screen.
Oh, thank you so much, sir.
So you let me know when to change the slide. I'll do it. Okay.
Sure, done. Thank you so much, sir.
So okay, let me introduce yourself. It's okay, relax. So let me introduce you to the audience. Krishna is a assistant professor in AIIMS Delhi, and if I'm not wrong, she's from the first batch of postgraduates from AIIMS New Delhi, and she was also a faculty at AIIMS Gorakhpur for a while, and she's a AOCMF fellow, and she has done her AOCMF fellowship from Germany, Freiburg, Germany, if I'm not wrong. And but this is the topic, transparency in peer review. I welcome Krishna, and I hope 20 minutes would be good enough for you so that we can have a decent question and answer after that. Over to you. I'm muting myself. Just let me know. I'll keep pushing off the slides. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Welcome to day 3, part 2 of the lecture. As Ashish sir has already told us, that balance between fair treatment of authors, integrity, and your truthfulness or dedication towards your own specialty. So, doing a review for any article is basically maintaining a balance between all 3 of them. You need to treat the author how you would like to be treated if you had written an article. That's number 1. But in doing so, you should make sure that you are not unnecessarily coming under the influence of, if at all you get to know that this article could be from this and this place, then it should not be either a favoritism or an under pressure, any kind of emotional obligation kind of a thing should not creep in. And you should maintain your honesty towards your subject above anything else. So, now this is what is expected. What Ashish sir told us, the ethics or integrity part and the balance of all the factors, that's the ideal world scenario. But many a times we fail to achieve this ideal world scenario. So that's why we need the cross checks. The legal, the question that we saw, that are there any legal laws of the land about this subject or not? Now legal law is nothing but a cross check. So before legality comes a introspection from the fraternity, the oral and maxillofacial surgeons or the author or the scientific community inspecting themselves, whether are we doing the review process right or wrong, or is there any favoritism or negative bias from the side of the journal, from the side of the publishing house. There can be many types of biases, geographical selection bias and all those things, about which paper should be could get to the readership. So in this, are the authors treated fairly or not? Whether the review process is being done right or not? These things can be internally among the scientific community can be checked only when the review and the entire review process is made public and open to all. So this is what we mean by transparency in review process. Moving on to next slide, sir. So,
Fine, Krishna.
thank you. Yeah, fine. Yeah. So before getting to know about the transparency in review process, which is a relatively, I would say, a newer concept, we should know that what is the usual review process before making it public, or before bringing in the transparency aspect to it. What is the usual review process? Usually it goes, any article will undergo 2-3 rounds of peer review before it gets acceptance. Like reviewers will make some comments, and they will either make the changes in their publication, or they will file a rebuttal, which will be then undergo a 3rd review process, or the editor's wisdom will affect the decision whether to whether to let that publication go to the readership or not. So it's a stage process, and peer review checks for you whether the whatever research has been done, whether the research question is relevant to the time, to the scientific community, whether there are any kind of biases on the author's side in conducting the research, and what is the quality of evidence provided. So these are the things which reviewer will see. And what do the editors check? They check for the plagiarism, they check for the duplicacy of the publication, as we have already talked about. And editors can also do the function of a tiebreaker when there is a discordance between the two reviewers. One reviewer says very highly of the authors or their work, and the other reviewer says gives very much of negative comments. In that case, either the editor can choose to have their own wisdom and see the value of the paper and go ahead with the decision, or they can bring in the 3rd reviewer into the picture. So this is the usual process. Next slide, sir. So whenever any editor opens their logins into their account, editor account, what do they see? They see whether how many new submissions are there in the journal, how many are pending reviews, how many are requiring re-review or a third reviewer process. This is the first thing that they see. Next slide, sir. And then there are, as I said, duplication check softwares are there, plagiarism check softwares are there. Here on the screen that you can see that on the right hand side there is a drop down option. So going on to that, they can check all these things. So plagiarism, you can if you are suspecting, you can write a confidential note to the editor that I suspect plagiarism, but actually it's already managed by the software part. Moving on to the next, sir. And then there are whenever there is a third review requirement is there, now there is a new feature that just by the title of the article or the keywords of that article, you can search that how many other people have done a research in the same subject, and the editor can select them as the reviewer, or whenever there is a tie, they can the review process can go on to the software selected or software suggested, I would rather say, reviewers. And the last option, as we saw in the yesterday's session, would be author suggested reviewers, but that's the last option. So usually either people who have, either the editor will select from their drop down menu, and how you can be seen in their menu, you have to have your own publication in the respective field so that your name is visible, and then the software can also suggest by your own publication only. So to become a reviewer, you should be a author or a researcher first. It's not mandatory, but the more work you do in a particular type of field, the more your name will have visibility in the software, and more chances that you will be selected as a reviewer. Moving on to the next. So this is again whenever there is a third reviewer requirement. So that time the selection software. This is the slide is showing the same thing. So we can move on to the next. Yeah. So what is the catch in the entire process? The process was confidential until recently. The authors did not know who reviewed and from which geographic location, or nor the readers knew that who did the review process. And the review comments were also never made public to the reader. So first part is okay, that authors should not know who did the review, and reviewers should not know from where came the article, because this is required to remove the bias of coming to a decision whether to go ahead with the publication or not. But how about reviewer comments? Reviewer comments, I mean, as readers or the consumers of the scientific content, we would like to know that what all stages the article has gone through before publication. How many redo versions have been done to improve the quality of the content that is published. This is important because, number one, the person who wants to do research on the same subject would want to apply their mind in designing a study based on the similar research published and their review process. If someone has done some mistakes and they have to redo the writing process 2-3 times, I would not want to repeat the same mistakes when I do the study. So when I read about a particular subject to conduct or design my own study, I would want to know that what are the pitfalls, what are the common pitfalls that scientific community does not want to see. So that is why reviewer comments is something which is useful to us, and it should be made public. So this is a new feature that has entered, and herein comes the transparency. Next slide, sir. So there are some analytic softwares like Clarivate Analytics. This used to be earlier a part of Thomson Reuters, and then there is elsewhere, and it has its own indexing analytics counterpart called Scopus. So what does this Clarivate Analytics or Scopus does is they give authors an H index or an I10 index, which essentially says that how much useful an author's work is to the scientific community, how many times it has been cited, how many people read the article, and how many people quote the article from a particular author. So this is author indices. Likewise, there are journal indices also, so which would be called impact factor. That is to say, and for example, an average article from a particular journal, how many times it has been cited. So this Clarivate Analytics and Scopus, they are the indicing bodies of publication houses, respectively Thomson Reuters and Elsewhere's. Likewise, Web of Science and Publons, these are the commercial websites which do the same thing, that of uh, giving attaching value or readership value to authors or journals. And then Scholar One is the software which does essentially the same thing. So these things, they influence um, on individual journals, and but we have to understand that these are all commercial bodies. So actually, rather than commercial bodies, it should be us judging. There should be an internal judgment about how good a journal is doing or how bad a journal is doing. So for to do this, Publons came with Publons and Embopress. These were the people, again commercial websites. They came up with an idea that why not make all the review process public. By doing this, they assumed that there'll be less chances of personal phone calls that do me a favor and my and please say yes to my article, from authors to reviewers. That could be the problem number one, and problem number two could be, if I own a journal and if I want my impact factor to rise, then I may ask the authors to quote articles from my own journal. So that was another catch. So to bring in some more transparency, the Publons and Embopress, they came up with an idea in 2012 that we should make all the review process public, all the review comments public, so that the readers can judge themselves what the reviewers had said. Did they had they commented negatively and still the publication saw the light of the day, or had they given good comments and the publication never came out or something like that. So it was originally a commercial website's idea, which later on got accepted by the scientific community and the various publishing houses and the various journals. But still, it is not a compulsion. There are journal policies. Some prefer transparent review process policy, and some they have not yet embraced the transparent review process policy. So moving on to the next. So when we say that some journal has accepted or embraced transparent review process, what does it include? That along with the manuscript, there would be a link in the online publication of the journal, which would have a which would open all the reviewers comments records, and those files will also be citable. So here in those files we can see the paper review comments, author response to review.
Krishna, please unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what whenever we say that journal has embraced the transparent peer review policy, what does it mean? That there would be a link to the online publication, which would also be citable, and that link would open the documents like what were the peer reviewer comments for this particular article, what was the author response to reviewers, how many repeated reviews were done, and what were the comments and rebuttals or revisions during each process, and ultimately editorial decision. So these all files will be open if you click on the link. So this is what happens when any journal goes on for transparent review policy. Moving on to the next. What is edited out is no naming and shaming. So we don't want professional nice ties to get broken. So probably the identity of the reviewers is not shown here. Only the comments are shown. Unless the reviewer wants that, I don't mind my name going public. In that case, name also can come there. Third party information which can have confidentiality issues, they are not shown here. And confidential comments to the editors, For example, if you're suspecting plagiarism or if you're suspecting duplicacy of publication, those comments which you have written just to the editors, they will not be shown here because it is about naming and shaming authors, and it's probably not a great idea. So these are not given out, but what something which can help the scientific communities, a new budding researcher, a new budding reviewer, those things are given as a link. Moving on to the next. Authors get a choice to make the review process public. So it's not only journal's decision. Once the journal has embraced the policy of transparent review, they will ask the authors that when there is in principle acceptance, when we decide that we are going to do the publication for you, would you want to make your review process public? It's only done if authors say yes to this. But I think this is my personal view, that as a scientific community we should embrace this thing more and more, because by doing this we can bring in reproducibility of the review process also. There are review process is as Divya ma'am yesterday rightly said, the editors want to bring in diversity in their selection. They want to have they want to have juniors also as reviewers, and they want to have senior people also as reviewers, because we don't want
भूजा
all
चना खाना है ना?
Sorry, Krishna, please unmute yourself.
Yes, ma'am. So, from editors' perspective, they want to have a diversity in selection of the reviews. So reviewers are not only professors; they are budding surgeons or budding scientists of the community also. So if we all, as authors or as researchers, embrace this transparent peer review policy, and whenever you publish an article and the journal asks you that do you want to go with the transparent review process, I think we all should say yes to this. Why? Because number one, it will help the other researchers, budding researchers, to do a better research, learning from your mistakes. And likewise, you would be learning from others' mistakes also. That's number one. Number two, the researchers who are new researchers in the field, they will get an idea as to how to do a review process. And number three, it will definitely reduce the fraudulent kind of researches, because more and more authors show show acceptance to the transparent review policy, more and more we can make it compulsory. I mean, in the coming days we can make this a compulsory thing. Right now it's an optional thing, but yeah. So moving on to the next.
भूजा वगैरह तो नहीं खाना है?
So what are the benefits?
Krishna, please unmute. Sorry about this.
I'm really sorry. So it gives recognition to the reviewers also. That's a added benefit, apart from bringing in transparency, reproducibility between the review process, learning opportunity for the authors and reviewers. As I already said, I think I get unmuted and unmuted repeatedly. So I don't know how much it went through. But yeah, besides those points, this is an unpaid job. There is no, you don't get promotion for reviewing an article. You don't get paid to review an article. So who would do this? Unless you get, so this thing, transparent review process, it gives a kind of recognition also. And it is projected to stop fraudulent reviews and favoritism also. More and more people embrace this. We can make this a compulsory thing also. Moving on to next, sir. Next slide. So right now it is a voluntary thing from journal side and from author's side whether to embrace this policy or not. But the more we accept this, the more we can make it a routine, and then in that case it will be less of a trouble that the fraudulent publications we will have less to deal with. That's number one. Number two, even for the positive review process or successful publications, the choice is made by the authors. Should it? Should it be made compulsory? That's point number one. And the second thing is, like just how negative results are also published in any research. What about articles that get rejected? When Publons, the commercial website started, it invited the reviewers that after you have done the review and after the article has gone in for publication, you can submit your review. So likewise, can the Publons or any other commercial body do the same thing, that even if your article has been rejected say 2-3 times, would you want to project your review process? What could be the benefit of this negative? Even if the article has been rejected, still if someone wants to publish the review process, by that it's a benefit to the authors also and to the reviewers also. Reviewers, as I said, they will get the credit for it. They will get to share their views about a particular research interest, whether the same thing should be pursued by others or not. It will be a learning lesson. But also sometimes there are research on orphan drugs or the area of interest which are not commercially very yielding. So people do not want to publish research on that. People are skeptical about moving forward with this research, the journals, especially journals or editors. But if the scientific community, they embrace this negative moving on with the negative, publishing the negative review process also, in that case there will be more research ideas floating in the world, which can be made better by some other researchers. It's basically, you cannot do it all, you have to pass on the candle. So even if I have some research idea and I worked on it, it never got published, but if I choose that let the entire review process go public, then that thought process somebody else in future can pick up, maybe modify it, maybe bring in some modification in the idea and go ahead with the publication. So that will be ultimately useful to the mankind. So this is not there in the transparent review process as yet, but I would say that Publon's, a commercial website, brought in the idea. Then that in itself is not a great thing for the scientific community. This idea should have come from our side, that this process should be a transparent process. So likewise, this is just a food for thought, that there should be a transparency in peer review process for the negative or the rejected papers also. That's a personal opinion. And moving on to the other one. Yeah, so that's about indices for journals credibility based on how many negative reviews or rejections. So yeah, that's just a lateral thinking. But the point is the same, that there are so many articles which never see light of the day, probably because of some biases, probably because the author got tired of rejections, they never worked on it. But if they just made the review process public, then maybe somebody else can work on it, and the science can move in the forward direction. So moving on to the next. So last year we saw that Lancet, NEJM, there were studies on HCQ, whether it is useful in corona or not, and they had to retract this. Why this happened? Because there was no integrity. There was some commercial tie-up, and they just went on with publication without showing without showing data, or without basically cooking up the data. That was the issue. Now these kind of things, they will not happen so frequently, or the big journals will not have to have a shame on their name if the review process was embraced by one and all and it was made public. In that case, you would know that if I get caught, then there would be a problem. So many times laws are not just to punish somebody, but they are to plant a rightful fear in your head, that if I don't do things properly, then it's going to go public. So that way. Moving on to the next. So yeah, transparency in review is not something which is a universal thing right now. It's an optional thing for the journals and also the authors. Once authors say yes, then only you can do this citation thing. But it's just the beginning of the change. More we embrace it, more we will get to know the truthful research. Otherwise, we will be fumbling in the sea of truth and untruth. So yeah, let's join hands, and let's, as authors, whenever the journal asks us that do you want to move in with transparent review process, let us all select yes. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna. So I'll stop sharing the
Please.
screen, right?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Am I audible, ma'am? So thank you, Krishna. Thanks a lot for this thought. Ashi, are you there?
Yes, I am.
So what she said is making the whole review process transparent and making it public. Thought is quite rebellious, I would say, Krishna. Or
Yeah.
progressive or whatever. Let the chief editor-in-chief decide that.
I
How
think
how many authors would like that? That if my article is rejected, the editor can put that in public. Would I like that, ma'am?
the review process?
The whole review, the comments,
It
everything.
should be. It should be. The thing is, it should be. That's the whole point of the talk. That we should maybe embrace a little bit of courage and move, push the scientific community
Yeah,
towards
that's a brave thought
transparency.
actually. In
Yeah.
practicality, ma'am, how much is that possible?
Very few journals are at present doing it. I know Frontiers. Frontiers is a good name, and it is an open access journal, and it publishes all the review comments. As Krishna, you said, rightly said, Publons takes up. Publons give you credit of your review only once you have placed your review comments in their add-on box. So you
Yeah.
just don't get your credit of reviewing unless you have put your remarks in that box. So
Yeah, ma'am. So this rebellious thought, as sir rightly said, it was not from a person. It was from Publon commercial website, and then that was in 2012, and it got bought by Thomson and Reuters in 2016. It was taken over, the entire website. So, but then Thomson and Reuters, being a publishing body itself, it brought in some changes within itself. Probably they sensed the trend towards the changing trend, and they thought that rather than others publishing the reviewers being rebellious and publishing their own reviews online on a separate platform, why not merge the two, and why not under our umbrella, whatever journals are there, let us ask them to incorporate this feature. So it is I think from Thomson and Reuters side, it's an attempt to transform a rebellion into a organized change for good.
Yeah.
So that's what transparency in peer review is about.
the best part is that the reviewer also, because of its his or her comments, gets citations. So that
Gets
is
citations.
citable. Otherwise, the citable articles in any journal are only the original research or review articles. They are not these short communications or letter to editor are not citable. But here, even the reviewer comments are citable. So that is the good thing about it. Yeah.
Okay, a couple of questions for everyone on the panel. Ashi, two questions from the previous talk is again regarding the author. There's a lot of controversy regarding the whose name goes first. So one question is that if a PG is not interested in publishing, then can guide do it, and then who is the first author?
The
And
PG
the other aspect of the same question, what, and that's quite again a brave one, what if the student does not want to put his name of his guide in publication? So how's that?
So the answer, one single answer to both the questions is he should wait till his PG is over. And,
Yeah, that's true.
And then once he's finished with his PG, then he decides what he needs to do.
No, but even then, if the guide sees that
That's on a lighter note.
it was his idea and the thesis was done and his name is not there,
That's
he may
on a
write to the
lighter note.
editor. Yeah. So we don't want rebellions here. But yes, it should be.
Ideally,
We have to think whoever has got the idea. So the contribution of authorship has to be well defined. If there has been a contribution, yes, the person should be given the authorship. If there is no contribution, then there's no point giving authorship, whosoever it may be.
So I think from when publication is concerned, everyone is at par on an equal platform, whether be it a PG student or a guide. So both are researchers, both have worked. It was someone's idea, because when PG came, obviously he or she did not have any much insight into the subject. So it is, both the parties are involved. Both the parties should be there. And if he or she does not want to publish, then whether the guide can go ahead with publication or not, again the same thing. Does not want to publish, does it ever happen? I mean, that's a question.
The thesis is the intellectual property of the institute.
Yeah.
So so the guide can publish it because he is still in the part of the institute, so he can publish it. Nobody can stop a institute to publish its own data. The data is the copyright of intellectual property of the institute. So the guide can, if he's still there in the department, he can publish it. The policy is, our policy is the name of the postgraduate should be the first author. You cannot change policies for one particular student or one particular, the policy has, the law has to be there, the law of the land has to be followed, right? Lot of, it's a common scenario, a lot of our own PGs go into practice, they are not interested in academics, there's nothing wrong in that. But then we have to take a middle path, write the thesis, request them, talk to them, and then the right ways, the first name of the author has to be the postgraduate student. Is he interested in writing or not? That's a very subjective thing. The policy doesn't change for any particular person.
That's very right. I mean, I was just mentioning that on a very lighter note, but yes, if the PG student, as we mentioned earlier, needs to be the first author. There's no contesting that point. And as what Divya ma'am and Krishna just said, that everyone who has been included or involved in the research has to be mentioned in the research research publication at the end of the day. And if somehow you feel that you missed out someone, then there's a corrigendum which is published, which includes that particular author. So you have to give due regard and due respect to all the people who are involved, whether it is the junior most or the senior most, or a person who had an intermediary role. So basically, to summarize what has been said, all the people who have been involved in the research should be mentioned in the paper.
Another query on the same note, how effective is tripartite agreement between the institute, the guide, and the student? Do we have a legal tripartite agreement when we initiate a thesis, ma'am, in the institute? I don't know that works in our institute. We don't have a written agreement from the student. It is the policy which holds its ground, and we don't have a tripartite agreement. Let me ask for the panelist if it is there in their institutes. A written agreement from the student and the guide and the co-guides. I don't think.
When the thesis is published, there is a set of documents and certifications which are published alongside with the thesis submission. But as far as the publication is concerned, it is see, for a publisher or for Divya ma'am, if a paper is coming out from, say, suppose PGI, she will take that paper as a whole. She will not take individual authors, or she will not take it as that manuscript will be reviewed as a whole. So what we can sense from the chats are that there is a lot of discrepancies, or there's a lot of misunderstandings or communication gaps between the co-authors amongst themselves. So if such a thing happens, and if one of them, what needs to be done is all of them have to sit for a cup of tea, sort out the differences, and say, listen, this is the paper that we published. We work together as a team, and we would like to publish it. I am going ahead and doing this. Does anybody have any doubt? So, then and there that matter is solved. Otherwise, what happens is, if suppose faculty A publishes a paper which involves work of faculty B and C, and both B and C are not involved in the paper, and it is sent, then B and C obviously will get offended ki without our knowledge, has it been sent? That is obvious, that's normal. So the only way is to maintain a good professional communication. Okay, fine, you may not be on good terms personally, that's a different matter, you keep that aside. But professionally sit down, discuss the matter, because once it goes to Elsevier or it goes to Dr. Divya ma'am, the thing is open out in public. So you should maintain the fact that घर की बात घर में रहनी चाहिए types. Your discord or your discussions should not go out and open in public. Don't wash your dirty linen in public. So publications can get messy, but it's important that as a department, as an institute, you maintain your sanctity, you maintain the respect a guide deserves. A guide respects the postgraduate student, intellectual property rights are not violated, and ethics and honesty are maintained. So only when that is done, all these small issues which we are seeing in the chat will not happen. I'm just taking it as an overall broad view that take everyone on board. That is the way to go forward.
Perfectly and very aptly said.
Yeah,
Exactly.
self-moral policing. So you have to be policing yourself.
That's what I said yesterday. Wisdom and common sense prevails above everything. Don't lose that. Don't lose that. Another query: can we publish same data with more than one paper using various models, techniques? Can we publish same data with more than one paper?
This was also discussed yesterday.
Yesterday it was discussed.
It was discussed. It should not be done. that is called salami slicing. So salami, if you know, it is basically cutting the same data into various small pieces and you can make a different dish. Divya ma'am would like to add on.
Sometimes people do what? The table is published in one article and the graph is published in another article. So they are avoiding plagiarism because the same thing is not going. But if you see, the data is presented differently in two articles, the same data. So which is wrong. It should not be
wrong.
done.
It's wrong. A very quick question from the chat coordinator. If paper have been published from a thesis, can we publish that thesis as a book? I think yes, we can. We can quote the reference of the paper. That's totally fine. If the
So
authors
whatever
are
you
the same.
publish, yeah, that's from Dr. Altaf Mir again. So whatever you publish is basically, you have to make sure that you quote that person, or that even if it is your own research paper and you've written an article or you've written a chapter, so you quote that particular article from which you have taken that material from. And you will not quote it word to word. You will probably write it in your own words or explain it in a different way. So like, for example, Divya ma'am has come out with a textbook on oral maxillofacial surgery, which obviously includes the research paper of her extensive data. It also includes co-authors who are most of us on the panel and some of the people who are on the participants as well. So you cannot write a textbook without going into research papers. You have to take out data from the research papers. But what is important is you might acknowledge them, or you might give them a reference as well, that yes, this data has been taken up from this particular source. So if you go through your textbooks, standard textbooks, at the end, there's a long list of references. There's a long list of articles from where data has been taken up from, or material has been taken up from. So that I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Ma'am, a question for you. What is your opinion on motivating the reviewers who have reviewed many articles for your journal?
I think I have my talk on this on the last day. So we'll
Great.
wait till then. Yeah.
So we can wait till then. And we are 10 minutes over 6 p.m. ma'am. We want more questions, so we can wrap it up.
We can wrap it.
Okay,
Yeah.
last question, ma'am. What type of contribution should be placed in the acknowledgement section of article?
See, today only, today only I was discussing on this with my team. We had a publication with the HBTU. Am I audible?
Yes.
Sachin, yeah. So they wanted the article to come up, and now the issue was I was doing the 3D with my engineer. All 3D work was done by us, but we couldn't be the co-authors. Why? Because we were not the co-guides. So we were not the co-guides. So the university was not allowing us to be coming up as the authors or the co-authors. So in that scenario, we suggested them, if you can't make us the co-authors, it's good, go ahead with your publication. The student should not suffer. It's the university's policy, then just acknowledge us. So that's the role of acknowledgement. Those people who have worked for the article but cannot be given the authorship, they should be acknowledged in the end.
Fine, ma'am. There was just a comment or a query from one of my colleagues, Vinay. He is saying that the reviewers or the editorial board can check from the IEC number whether the study has been put across the institute. Maybe if the author has just put in just a random number to fake it up, so that we can cross it. Can we cross check from the institute ethical committee number? Just write an email and check whether the study has been done or not. Is the IEC number is original or not?
Yes, usually the two things which are legal. Yesterday also we were talking about, should we be writing the ethical approval or not? So ethical approval is a must, and the second thing is that informed consent is must. These two are the legal things to be entered in your article somewhere in the methodology part. So if somehow during the reviewing process, the reviewer or the editor feels that this study cannot be ethically approved.
Exactly. If we find something fishy in that.
Yes, if you find something fishy,
that's a rare scenario.
Yeah.
We can always contact we can contact the institute. So shall we wind up, ma'am? I think we are done with the day.
Yeah.
So thanks to all the online participants, viewers, and the people who have put up questions. We are still here for the next few days. So any queries, you can always again put it in the chat box and we'll try to solve it out in the next few days. Thanks to the speakers, Ashi and Krishna. Thanks a lot for a very swift and timely presentation. And are we having a poll or something, or it
No,
will be
not today. Not today. Just a
not today?
feedback. Just
A feedback
and
form will be provided to you in the group, and
And-
we request you to
and MCQs too.
and MCQs also.
MCQs have already been put in the group.
So I
Thank you.
thank you all, and I wish to see you again tomorrow at 5 p.m. Right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot to everybody.